Assalamu alaikum. Welcome back to Sufi Essence with Hammad Syed. Part 8.14. The Spoils of War. Surah Al-Anfal. Kanz al-Aman. Quran. Al-Anfal. The Spoils of War. 8-70. O Prophet, say to the captives in your hands, if Allah finds any good in your hearts, He will give you better than what has been taken from you, and will forgive you. And Allah is most forgiving, most merciful. The echoes of the Battle of Badr had barely faded, yet the air in Medina was thick with a new kind of tension. The fledgling Islamic community, which had just achieved a miraculous victory against a formidable force, now faced a new challenge: what to do with the captives. These were men who had come from Mecca, their very homeland, to extinguish the light of Islam. They were the leaders of Quraysh, the very people who had persecuted the Prophet, peace be upon him, and his followers for over a decade. The prevailing custom of the time would have dictated a swift and harsh retribution, a life of servitude or a massive ransom. But Islam in its divine essence was here to break the shackles of a brutal and vengeful past. The context of this verse is not merely the aftermath of a battle. It is the culmination of a long and arduous struggle. For 13 years, the Prophet, peace be upon him, and his noble companions, the Sahaba Karam, may Allah be pleased with them, had endured unimaginable hardship in Mecca. They were a small, vulnerable group of believers in a city dominated by a pagan aristocracy. The Sahaba's faith was not an intellectual exercise. It was a profound act of defiance against a deeply entrenched system of idolatry and injustice. They faced ridicule, torture, and a social and economic boycott that pushed them to the brink of starvation. Many of them were slaves who were brutalized for their belief, while others were influential merchants who were stripped of their wealth and status. This was the lived reality of faith in Mecca, constant test of one's allegiance to Allah. The local history of Mecca at the time was one of deep-seated tribalism and a fierce loyalty to ancestral traditions. The Quraysh tribe, the keepers of the Kaaba, held immense power and prestige. Their religion was a complex tapestry of polytheism, with idols housed in the Kaaba and rituals that revolved around material gain and tribal honor. The message of Tawhid, the oneness of Allah, was seen not just as a religious threat, but as a direct challenge to their economic and social order. The new faith preached a complete surrender to Allah, a concept that was utterly alien to a society that valued pride and self-sufficiency above all else. When the Sahaba, driven by their unshakable faith, emigrated to Medina, they were not just leaving their homes. They were performing a spiritual hijrah from the confines of a corrupt society to a land where they could truly live for Allah. The Battle of Badr was the physical manifestation of this spiritual conflict. The captives were not just enemies. They were the very men who had orchestrated the persecution and forced emigration of the believers. Now, as the captives stood before them, the emotions of the Sahaba must have been a complex mixture of anger, relief, and a profound sense of justice. The Prophet, peace be upon him, consulted his companions on how to proceed. Some, like Umar ibn al-Khattab, may Allah be pleased with him, advocated for a harsh punishment, arguing that these were the leaders of disbelief who had caused immense suffering. Others, like Abu Bakr as-Siddiq, may Allah be pleased with him, advocated for mercy, suggesting that they be ransomed, hoping that some might find faith. It was at this critical juncture that Allah sent His command. The need for this verse was to teach the believers a new paradigm of justice, one that transcended the human desire for vengeance and was rooted in divine compassion. The reason why Allah sent this command was to reveal that His justice is not merely retributive, but is also transformative. The verse was a test for the believers, a challenge to rise above their past grievances and to embody the very mercy that they had received from Allah. It was a testament to the divine wisdom that recognizes the possibility of change in the human heart. The verse does not demand a feigned conversion. It demands a sincere change, a goodness that Allah Himself would find in their hearts. This was a direct invitation from the divine to the captives, bypassing human intermediaries and appealing directly to their qalb. Allah was telling them that the door to forgiveness was open, and that true freedom lay not in being released from chains, but in being freed from the shackles of disbelief. This divine edict set a precedent for all time, teaching humanity that even in the most hostile of circumstances, the hand of mercy must be extended, for the ultimate judgment belongs to Allah, and he judges by the state of the heart. Kanzaliman Quran, all-encompassing, the spoils of war, 8-71. And if they intend to deceive you, then indeed Allah is sufficient for you. He is the one who supported you with his help and with the believers. This verse, immediately following the one on compassion, serves as a divine counterpoint, a pragmatic and profound lesson in human vigilance. The verses are a masterful illustration of the balanced nature of Islamic teachings, to be compassionate and forgiving, but never to be naive. The reason for this verse's revelation was a divine and historical necessity. While the hand of mercy was extended, there was a real possibility that some captives, in their cunning might feign conversion or sincerity in order to gain their freedom, only to return to their former hostilities against the believers. The verse was a direct response to this potential for treachery. The Prophet, peace be upon him, was always a model of both compassion and wisdom. While he was divinely guided, he also operated within a human context where trust was a precious and often fragile commodity. The local history of Mecca was filled with examples of deception and broken treaties by the very leaders of Quraysh who were now captives. Quraysh had, on numerous occasions, plotted to kill the Prophet, peace be upon him. They had shown no mercy to the weak and vulnerable amongst the believers. This history of betrayal necessitated a divine warning. Allah, in his infinite wisdom, knew the true intentions of the hearts, and thus revealed this verse to arm the Prophet, peace be upon him, and the Sahaba, with a profound sense of tawakkul, absolute reliance on Allah. The verse is a direct command to place ultimate trust, not in the sincerity of human beings, which can be fickle and deceptive, but in the unwavering and all-powerful support of Allah. The phrase, Allah is sufficient for you, is a fortress of faith. It tells the believers that no matter what plots are hatched against them, whether by external enemies or by internal hypocrites, they have the ultimate protector in Allah. The verse also serves as a beautiful reminder of past triumphs. The phrase, He is the one who supported you with his help and with the believers, is a powerful rhetorical device. It reminds the believers of the miraculous victory at Badr, a victory that was not won by their numbers or strength, but by the direct intervention of Allah. This historical reference serves to strengthen their faith and remind them that the same power that granted them victory is their ultimate source of protection. For the Sahaba Kiram, who had witnessed the divine help with their own eyes, this verse was not just a promise. It was a proven reality. They had seen how Allah had sent angels to support them in battle, and how he had granted them victory against all odds. This verse taught them that their vigilance should be grounded not in fear, but in faith. They were to continue their mission of mercy and compassion, knowing that if any deception arose, their Lord was fully aware and would handle it. This is the essence of true faith, to act with kindness and grace, while placing one's ultimate trust in the all-knowing, all-powerful Allah. It is a lesson that is as relevant today as it was then. To be a beacon of light in a world of darkness, while knowing that our ultimate protection comes only from the divine. Kanzel, Iman, Quran, all-encompassing, the spoils of war, 8-72. Indeed, those who have believed and emigrated and struggled in the way of Allah with their wealth and their lives, and those who gave shelter and helped, they are supporters of one another. And those who have believed, but have not emigrated, you have no responsibility for their protection until they emigrate. But if they seek your help in the religion, it is your duty to help them, except against a people with whom you have a treaty. And Allah is seeing of what you do. This verse marks a profound legal and social turning point. It's not just for the Islamic community of the time, but for the very concept of human brotherhood. The historical context of this revelation is the establishment of the society in Medina, a city that had welcomed the Prophet, peace be upon him, and his followers. The Sahaba were now a mix of two distinct groups: the Muhajireen, who had left everything behind in Mecca, and the Ansar, the people of Medina, who had opened their hearts and homes. The reason for this verse was to legally and socially codify the unprecedented bond that had formed between these two groups. The Prophet, peace be upon him, upon his arrival in Medina, had initiated a system of brotherhood where he paired each Muhajir with an Ansari, making them brothers in faith. This was an act of profound social engineering. It's designed to break down the deep-seated tribal affiliations that were a source of constant conflict in pre-Islamic Arabia. The verse serves to elevate this spiritual brotherhood to a legal status, declaring that the Muhajireen and Ansar were supporters of one another, a bond that was stronger than blood. This was a revolutionary concept, and the Sahaba embraced it with a level of sincerity that is almost unimaginable today. The Ansar shared their wealth, their land, and even their businesses with their Muhajir brothers, demonstrating a level of sacrifice that was a living testament to their faith. The verse then makes a crucial distinction for those believers who had not emigrated from Mecca. The local history of Mecca at this time was still dominated by the Quraysh polytheists, and there were many believers who, for various reasons, were unable to make the hijrah. The verse addresses their status, clarifying that while they were brothers in faith, the responsibility for their military protection was not the same as for the Muhajireen. This was a pragmatic ruling, as the nascent state of Medina could not be expected to militarily protect every believer still living in Mecca. However, the verse immediately follows with a beautiful and profound exception. But if they seek your help in the religion, it is your duty to help them. And this shows that the spiritual bond was never severed. If a believer in Mecca was facing religious persecution, the community in Medina was obligated to come to their aid, demonstrating that the spiritual unity of the Ummah was a sacred trust. The final part of the verse, with its caveat about treaties, reveals the profound ethical framework of Islam. At the time, the Prophet, peace be upon him, had treaties with certain tribes. And this part of the verse ensures that the Muslims would not violate those treaties, even for a noble cause. It teaches that the sanctity of a promise is paramount in the eyes of Allah, a principle that the Sahaba upheld with the utmost integrity. The verse concludes with the all-knowing eye of Allah, a reminder that every action, every act of support, and every upholding of a promise is witnessed and will be justly rewarded by the divine. This was a continuous source of comfort and guidance for the Sahaba, who faced a constant stream of complex legal and ethical dilemmas. Kanzul Iman, Quran, Al-Anfal, the spoils of war. 8-73. And those who have disbelieved, they are supporters of one another. If you do not do so, there will be tribulation in the land and great corruption. This verse serves as a stark and powerful warning, a crucial lesson for the believers on the nature of opposition and the imperative of unity. The need for this verse arose from a deep understanding of the human condition and the dynamics of power. The Sahaba, in their newfound unity and strength in Medina, could have become complacent. The victory at Badr, though a divine blessing, could have led to a false sense of security. The historical and local context of this verse is critical. The Quraysh of Mecca, even after their defeat at Badr, did not abandon their enmity. They were already plotting their next move, consolidating their forces and seeking alliances against the Muslims. This verse is a direct and timely warning from Allah, telling the believers to be aware of the unity of their adversaries. The Meccans, despite their internal tribal rivalries, were united in their opposition to Islam. They had one common goal: to crush the new faith and its adherents. This was a crucial lesson for the Muslims, who had just established a spiritual brotherhood that was stronger than tribal ties. Allah was essentially saying the enemy is united. If you, the believers, are not united as well, you will be left vulnerable. The tribulation and great corruption that Allah warns of are not just physical strife. They are also the spiritual and moral decay that would inevitably follow. If the believers lost their sense of unity, disunity among the believers would lead to weakness. And that weakness would allow the forces of falsehood to gain power and spread their corruption throughout the land. This corruption would manifest as injustice, oppression, and a return to the dark days of idolatry and ignorance. The Sahaba Kiram understood this warning viscerally. They had seen the tribulation and corruption of Meccan society firsthand. They knew the dangers of disunity from the endless tribal conflicts that had plagued Arabia for centuries. The Prophet, peace be upon him, had tirelessly worked to forge a spiritual bond among them, a bond that was a direct antidote to the tribalism of their past. This verse was a powerful reinforcement of that effort, a divine command to maintain their unity at all costs. It taught them that their unity was not just a social nicety, it was a spiritual necessity and a sacred responsibility for the well-being of the entire world. It showed them that the struggle for justice and truth is a collective one, and that a house divided cannot stand. This is a timeless lesson for all believers in every age, that their strength lies in their unity and their weakness in their fragmentation. Kanzul Iman, Quran, Al-Anfal, the spoils of war. 8-74. and those who have believed and emigrated and struggled in the way of Allah, and those who gave shelter and helped it, is they who are the true believers. For them are forgiveness and a noble provision. This verse, with its magnificent declaration, is a divine stamp of approval on the actions and sacrifices of the early believers. The need for this verse was to provide a clear, unequivocal definition of what it meant to be a true believer. In the eyes of Allah, it was a formal acknowledgement of the profound spiritual and physical sacrifices made by the Muhajireen and Ansar. The Sahaba Kiram, as living examples of faith, embodied the very essence of this verse. The Muhajireen had left their ancestral homes, their wealth, and their familial ties in Mecca, a city that was at the center of their world, for the sake of Allah. Their struggle was a testament to their unwavering faith. The Ansar, in their turn, had opened their homes, their hearts, and their resources to strangers who were refugees, a generosity that went against all tribal norms. Their help was a profound act of selfless faith. This verse was a divine tribute to their collective efforts. It was revealed to honor their sacrifices and to set them as a benchmark for all believers to come. The promise of forgiveness was a total purification of all their past sins and shortcomings, a divine recognition that their immense struggle and sacrifice had earned them a state of spiritual purity. The noble provision was a promise of a reward far greater than anything this world could offer. It was a promise of the highest stations in paradise and a closeness to Allah that is the ultimate goal of every seeker. This verse serves as a powerful source of motivation and hope. It teaches that the true measure of faith is not just what one says, but what one does. It sets a high standard of spiritual excellence, one that is proven through action, sacrifice, and an unwavering commitment to the path of Allah. For the Sahaba, this verse was a profound validation of their journey, a confirmation from their Lord that their efforts had been accepted and that their reward was beyond measure. It also served to remind future generations of believers of the qualities that define a true embodied faith. This is a timeless lesson that the path to spiritual nobility is paved with sincere actions, selfless giving, and a relentless struggle in the way of Allah. Kanz al-Iman, Quran, all-encompassing, the spoils of war. 8-75. And those who have believed and emigrated afterwards and struggled with you, they are from you. And the blood relations are more entitled to one another in the book of Allah. Indeed, Allah is knowing of all things. This final verse of Surah Al-Anfal concludes the legal and social discourse with a powerful and encompassing statement. The reason for its revelation was to address the two distinct groups of believers that would come after the initial wave of Muhajireen and Ansar. The first group was comprised of those who would embrace Islam and emigrate to Medina after the initial hijrah. The verse's declaration, "They are from you," is a beautiful and inclusive message, ensuring that the spiritual brotherhood of the early community would remain open to all who committed to the path of faith and struggle. It prevents the formation of an exclusive spiritual aristocracy and ensures that the doors of Islam are always open for those who seek to join the ranks of the true believers. This was a crucial message for the local context, as it would welcome new believers from Mecca and other parts of Arabia who would eventually join the community in Medina. The second part of the verse addresses a critical legal point that arose from the extraordinary circumstances of the early community. In the beginning, to strengthen the bond between the Muhajireen and Ansar, the Prophet, peace be upon him, had established a system where they would inherit from each other. This was an unprecedented measure that superseded the traditional laws of inheritance based on blood kinship. The need for this verse was to revert this temporary ruling and reinstate the natural and divinely ordained law of inheritance based on blood relations. The phrase, "the blood relations are more entitled to one another in the book of Allah," is a clear and final legal ruling. It shows the wisdom of Islamic law, which is both flexible in times of necessity and firm in its foundational principles. It also shows that Islam, while creating a new spiritual brotherhood, does not negate or destroy the natural bonds of family. It elevates them and places them within a divine framework. The verse's ultimate conclusion, "Indeed, Allah is knowing of all things," is a powerful statement that encapsulates the entire surah. It serves as the ultimate justification for all the commands and laws that have been revealed. It is a reminder that Allah's knowledge is not limited to human events or to the physical world. He knows the intricacies of human relationships, the subtleties of the heart, and the wisdom behind every command. For the Sahaba Kiram and for all believers, this final declaration provides a sense of profound certainty and peace. It tells them that even when they do not understand the reason behind a particular command, they can trust in the perfect, all-encompassing knowledge of their Lord. It is a call to a state of being where every action is a conscious act of worship, guided by the knowledge that nothing is hidden from the gaze of the divine. Hadith section. The life and teachings of Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, are the living commentary on the verses of the Quran, the themes of divine mercy, the importance of sincerity, and the sanctity of spiritual brotherhood found in Surah Al-Anfal are beautifully reflected in the Hadith literature. The Prophets, peace be upon him, words and actions provided the Sahaba Kiram with the practical wisdom to implement these divine commands in their daily lives. The Sahaba's faith was not just theoretical, it was a profound lived experience, and the Hadith provide a window into this spiritual reality. The Prophet, peace be upon him, taught. It's narrated by Anas ibn Malik. May Allah be pleased with him. There are three qualities. Whoever has them will find the sweetness of faith, that Allah and His Messenger are dearer to him than anything else, that he loves a person only for the sake of Allah, and that he hates to return to disbelief as much as he hates to be thrown into the fire. Sahih al-Bukhari, Hadith 16. This profound hadith speaks directly to the first verse of our discussion, which calls for the good in your hearts. The sweetness of faith is that inner goodness, the love for Allah above all else, the love for others for His sake, and the rejection of disbelief are the very hallmarks of the sincerity that Allah seeks. The Sahaba Kiram were living examples of this hadith. Their faith was so deeply ingrained that they were willing to sacrifice their homes and wealth. Their love for one another, the Muhajireen and the Ansar, was a love for the sake of Allah, and they had a profound and visceral hatred for the disbelief they had left behind. This hadith, therefore, is a perfect lens through which to view the faith of the early believers, showing that their actions were a direct result of their profound spiritual state. The Prophet, peace be upon him, also taught. It's narrated by Abu Musa al-Ash'ari. May Allah be pleased with him. The believers are like a solid structure, one part of which supports the other. Sahih al-Bukhari Hadith 481. He then interlaced his fingers to demonstrate. This hadith is a beautiful and powerful physical metaphor for the spiritual unity and mutual support that Allah commands in the verses of Surah Al-Anfal. The Sahaba Kiram lived this reality every day. The Muhajireen were the parts that had been uprooted from Mecca, and the Ansar were the parts that provided the support and foundation in Medina. This physical act of interlacing fingers perfectly symbolizes the strength and solidarity that comes from the bonds of faith. The hadith is a powerful reminder that the unity of the believers is not a mere social arrangement, but is a structural necessity, a collective body that stands strong only when its individual parts support one another. It encourages every believer to see themselves as an integral and supporting part of the global community of believers, a living embodiment of the divine command. Dua, O Allah, Ar-Rahman, Ar-Rahim, you are the one who unites hearts in your love. Grant us the sincere faith of the Sahaba Kiram and the unwavering trust of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. Help us to see the truth with wisdom and to act with compassion and justice. Protect us from the deception of our lower selves and the plots of our enemies. Make us a solid structure of believers whose hearts are bound by your love and whose actions are in your service. Forgive our shortcomings and make us worthy of your noble provision and your divine proximity. Grant us the grace to be true emigrants from all that is false and to struggle relentlessly in your path. Indeed, you are knowing of all things, and to you we return. May Allah illuminate your heart and mind with the light of this divine ilm. May you make your channel a beacon of guidance for all who seek spiritual clarity and truth. May your efforts be a source of immense reward, and may you be granted the highest stations of paradise. May the peace and blessings of Allah always be upon you and your loved ones. He grant you unwavering steadfastness on the path of truth, and may your work be a testament to His magnificent names, Ar-Rahman and Ar-Rahim.